Welcome back to another episode of Titans of Foodservice, where we delve deep into the world of food service, having the conversations around innovation, creativity, and empowering stories with the movers and shakers who have made it to the top. I'm your host, Nick Portillo, and today I have a special guest who is an industry trailblazer and has scaled the heights of the food service world. My guest today is none other than Scott Thomas, a visionary leader who began his remarkable career in food service as a division manager for Schwann's. Through sheer determination, unwavering dedication, and a passion for the food service industry, Scott charted a path that led him to the pinnacle of success. Starting out as a division manager, Scott quickly fell in love with food service sales. He would spend 6 weeks at a time in a single market seeing customers and building new business. Today, Scott stands as the Chief Revenue Officer of Bongards Creameries, a role that reflects his extraordinary journey and unwavering dedication to the food service industry. His story is a testament to the power of perseverance, leadership, and a deep-rooted love for what he does. Throughout this episode, we'll unravel the insights, experiences, and valuable lessons Scott has gathered during his tenure. From the challenges he conquered to the innovations he championed, we'll gain an insider's perspective on the ever-evolving landscape of food service. So, whether you're a seasoned professional in the food service industry, or heck, maybe it's just your very first day selling food, prepare to be captivated by Scott's incredible journey. Join us as we jump into the mind of a true titan of food service, exploring the flavors, the strategies, and the stories that have shaped his remarkable career. Get ready for a feast of insights, a symphony of success, and a journey that exemplifies the spirit of the food service industry. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let's welcome Scott to the Titans of Foodservice podcast. Okay, Scott, welcome to the Titans of Foodservice podcast. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to meet with me.
Well, I appreciate it, Nick. I've been looking forward to this ever since you sent me the invite, and it's fun to see the new trails that you're blazing out there in this industry. So looking forward to it.
Yeah. And anybody who knows Scott knows that he brings so much passion and enthusiasm, and this is going to be a fun conversation. I can already feel it.
What's not to love about the food industry? I love it. It's great. It's kind of like your dad. I can see his passion, and it's obviously gotten brought down to you, but it's such a fun industry.
It really is. How did you get into it?
Yeah, so I went to school at a state university here in Minnesota, and graduated with a business degree and international degree as well. And just through networking, I had a friend that was doing marketing at Schwann's, and they said, hey, they're looking for salespeople. So I interviewed with them, and long story short, I started out my food service career with the Schwann's company based right here in Minnesota.
Nice. And what was your first position when you were at Schwann's?
Yeah, they have this terminology that I don't know if it's still used in the industry because I know Schwann's was sold, but they use this term strike force. And so you basically loaded up your car, your suitcase, every possession that I had, and you would travel across the United States supporting the broker network, which is kind of like you and your dad.
Wow.
And they'd pick a market. There was typically a region manager within that market managing 4 or 5 states and a distributor and all that stuff. And you would go work those markets for 6 weeks, and then they'd fly you home every 6 weeks if you so choose. But yeah, you lived out of a suitcase and you travel. And I wouldn't have it any other way. Looking back 35 years, Nick, to be able, at least being then single, in the food industry, traveling the United States on somebody's dime. I mean, and learning it, it was fun. It's kind of old school, but what a way to learn the industry.
Wait, so let's say you came out to Orange County, California, you would stay here for 6 weeks and just make calls here with the brokers?
Yeah, pretty much. So you'd have a region manager, which is still today in today's environment. Most manufacturers, when they have region managers, are managing 4 or 5 states. So I'd come out and work with Food Sales East, your dad or whatever. I'd be in Southern Cal for 3-4 weeks, setting up broker ride widths back then, MA ride widths, DSRs, whatever they're calling them these days. And just blaze the trail and educating them. I worked for a frozen pasta division within Schwann's. So we were manufacturing like tortellini, manicotti, stuffed shells, those type of things. And just, driving it through a pull-through strategy. So and then, like you said, you didn't have to, but to help keep their sanity, every 6 weeks, if you wanted to go back to home, you could go home and see mom or dad or your girlfriend or whatever. But that was the deal.
I love that.
Yeah.
So when you were coming out of college, did you always have your sights set on the food service industry?
No, just fell into that. I mean, I count my blessings. So I knew I was extroverted, loved dealing with people. So I knew I was obviously a sales driven candidate. And, just by chance, by having a friend, getting me into the food industry. And here we are almost 35 years later. And I wouldn't have it any other way, Nick. I mean, the people are passionate. They're down to earth people. I love the food service side a little more in the retail because it's still so fragmented. Whereas on the retail, as you know, you got Safeway, Albertsons, Walmart. You can almost count them on your hands. Whereas food service, I just get a little more enjoyment out of that segment.
You must have a story or two that you can remember that was that's stuck in your memory from your time at Schwann's going on those road trips.
Oh my God, there is, but I don't think I can say it on a podcast. My closest friends have heard some of those stories, and maybe over a beer, Nick, I could tell you one of those stories. But that's a good question. Yeah, I don't know. Again, there's so many over 35 years. That's a good question, Nick. I'm not really sure what kind of good story I could tell you are the ones, like you said, the ones I can't tell you. So.
What about this? Like, what about a time maybe early on in your career where you got an objection, when you're trying to sell your product and how you overcame that objection?
Yeah, well, that back in the old days, that's probably fairly common because just fast forward 35 years, technology back then, we'd be driving, to work with an MA. I'd have to pull into a Marriott and find 30 food, phone banks, which you don't see anymore, right?
Right.
So all of this has changed. And so, but we'd get a ton of objections. And one of the unique things about Schwann selling frozen pasta is we would carry along, and this actually is a good story, so I'm glad you rephrased it that way. You remember the old Fry Daddies?
No.
I don't know if they still make them, but basically it's a little like a crock pot, and you plug it in, and you put oil in it. You can boil or deep fry French fries. Well, we modified that and put a grate in it, so you'd put water in it, and you'd plug it in, and then so long story short, when you get in these objections. We'd have this little briefcase we'd carry with. It's got this little portable Fry Daddy in it. And so you'd plug it in, you fill it up with water, it starts boiling, and we would boil the ravioli, because, it's par cooked. So you'd boil the ravioli and the tortellini, and seriously, once you put it in their mouth, Nick, it was so easy to sell because it's creamy. It was very good. So overcoming objections at a young age was pretty easy because the product was so good.
Yeah. And then how would you get it? How would you notify a distributor? Let's say you're in town. Would you have to rely on the broker to have the relationship with the distributor?
Yeah, because some things don't change, Nick. Back then the distributors had their own private label, and they're incentivized more for that. There's probably more earned income in that, if you want to call it that. So. So we were always dealing with that, but we would rely on the broker to set that up, and we really had a pull through strategy. It's kind of an unknown name. Schwann's was known for Tony's Pizza, Red Baron Pizza. We carved out 15,000 square feet in one of our pizza plants to start making frozen pasta. We didn't know if it was going to be successful or not. That's how it got started out. And we would really find the end users, as you know this as a broker, especially if you're kind of pioneering a line. We would find the 10, 20, 30 unit pizza chains that would buy in manicotti and really force it into a broadline distributor. So
basic blocking and tackling.
Yeah, which is still here 35 years later, still a almost similar strategy, right?
Isn't that crazy? There's so many other industries where technology just takes over, but this is definitely a relationship business. Seeing people face to face, it's a little bit easier to do it via Zoom or Teams nowadays, but it's still a people business.
Yeah, and that's what I love about it. I had many calls today with some big customers, some challenging one, and the conversation that ended at the day was, you want to do business with the people you know. And we all realize in today's competitive environment, you have to compete, but what's going to set you apart? That service level, the attention to detail, in all things equal, Nick, it's that relationship. If I like Nick and I like your dad, John, I want to do business with you. And
Sure.
that's what's so rewarding about the food service industry.
Yeah, absolutely. When you were done with Schwann's, where did you go from there?
Yeah, so now you're really, again, 35 years of memory. So I actually went to, it's funny, it's the old beef and pork division of Tyson. It was called Gorgeous
Mm.
Quick to Fix Foods. And that was back when Tyson wanted to be everything to everybody. And so they started buying beef and, other protein suppliers. And there was this brand called Gorgeous, which was the innovator. They were the first people to do pre-cooked burgers. So I left them for a different opportunity and spent about 4 years there working on quick to fix foods, which was known for country fried steaks and pre cooked burgers and things like that. So, and then funny, they go and sell them, and then fast forward again, they end up buying IBP, and here they are back in the business again. So, it's kind of full circle.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. How did you get to where you're at today? Was there anybody who helped you along the way? What was it that you got you to your position?
Wow, that's a really great question, and I think about this a lot, and really, it's a pretty easy answer for me. Schwann's, I spent almost 7 years there, and back then they were, in my opinion, probably one of the best training companies out there. They really invested in their people and just understanding finance, how to go to market, things like that. One gentleman, actually gentlemen in particular, one was John Drown. He was the head of food service for Schwann's. Very instrumental in my career. You knew where you stood with John. Very pointed. Just an extremely knowledgeable guy. And then his boss as well, Tom Karen. Tom is no longer with us, but those two were very influential. And I was young. I ended up running a division for them at age 22, running about a 30, $40 million company. So, and again, it's just my DNA. I grew up on a farm. I mean, my work ethic, I believe, is really strong, and just the strong desire to succeed. And I was just given a great opportunity from those guys who believed in me, and especially at a young age, Nick, to keep, progressing my career.
Yeah, you don't hear that too often. A 22-year-old running a division
Yeah.
or even a company. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, and again, like you said, 35 years, fast forward. So, so again, I count my blessings there, but I do owe my, career a lot to that organization. They were so buttoned up on what they do.
What did their sales? You mentioned their sales training program. What did that look like?
Yeah, well, like you said, nothing like, the strike force role, nothing like rolling up the sleeves and
Yeah.
learning it. I keep referring to old school because even though 35 years later with all this technology, I still believe a lot in that old school stuff. I still think some of that applies, Nick. Um, so their training program was just get out in the field, learn how to manage a broker, watch it through somebody else's eyes,
Mm.
um, you know, figure out what's working, what's not working, bring you back in at a corporate level, go through finance classes, P&Ls, profit margins, from a distributor, what they need, how to back into things to sell price, for an end user to continue to make their margins. That was all done in a classroom setting and also in an infield. So those two combined, so very solid.
Wow. Do you see on the whole, food companies having programs like that?
Ooh, the big. I'm with a mid cap company now. We do
Yeah.
about $1 billion in sales, which is pretty sizable. But
Yeah.
the biggest competitor is doing 5-6 billion, so we're kind of at that mid cap. I think the big ones, the Tysons of the world, the Smithfields, and all that, they're what I still call your vertical matrix companies. I think they spend a fair amount on resources like that. I think the smaller ones, maybe not so much. And then I like the mid cap like us. And then again, I'm kind of getting off a little bit here, but what I love about mid cap and why I love the company I work with so far is we're thin, we're lean, we're mean. It doesn't take 30 days to make a decision. And again, that's nothing against those big companies because I've been in those environments. But I think it's those companies that are out there that are mid-sized caps, Nick, are always going to have an opportunity to succeed.
Yeah, for sure. That the reason I brought that sales training program up is I was like, you know what? We need to have something formalized for our company. And we've actually been building that out of everything from how to tie your shoe to close the sale.
Okay.
We really like train our people because when we look at as a sales organization, if we look at our P&L, our number one line expense is salary, salespeople's salaries. So
Right.
it's like we have to constantly cultivate their skills to make
Yeah.
to help them and sell more.
Yeah. You just jogged my memory on, what did that sales training look like? Again, rewind 35 years. We actually sat down and it's to sit down at a white tablecloth. They showed us, where the fork goes, what one you eat from, what the glass is. And that was, that was part of the training. Now here we are on Zoom, working from home. I got jeans
Uh-huh.
on, maybe shorts you can't see, right?
Right.
And that's how it's all forwarded it. But yeah, that training. So, and I think there is a lost art there. So, by you emphasizing that, Nick, is, you sometimes I think you just go 100 miles an hour and don't really think through some of those
Mhm.
training things.
I think a lot of companies fall short too, and I can only speak to my experience. Is you bring in somebody, maybe they're an A player, but you don't. You just say, here's the keys, and go ahead and get in the car and start driving, and
Yeah.
didn't teach you how to drive the car.
Right. And that really resonates with me because when I came here 10 years ago and built this team, and I love your analogy of A players because I always want A players, right? It's not that you always get them, but I think I have the best team in the industry. I consider
Yeah.
them all A players. And you're right. You hand them the key, you give them just enough to be dangerous, but they're so good at what they do. And quite honestly, if I reflect on it, there's probably more training we should be doing, I should be doing. But you're right. If you're bringing in young talent, which again, I think there's a big void in this industry. You
Hmm.
see it, I see it. I sit on different conferences, committees, and still go to some of these big conferences, and it's no secret. And this might be on other podcasts, and I haven't watched them, but you look around the room, Nick, and I don't see a lot of you around. I'm
No.
56, 57, and if I see a 46, 47-year-old, I'm shocked. So it's somewhat alarming to me on just that next generation coming into the food industry. And I know it's people have brought it up before. I know we belong to IFMA, and it's on the radar of people, but yet I still haven't seen a lot of traction out there from that.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely see that. There aren't a lot of people my age within the food service sales side of the business, and even the decision makers. Sure, you do have some younger people coming through, but
Right.
you don't see it too much. And how will they make decisions in the future? The millennials and the Gen Zs, we're all on social media, online. We
Yeah.
want answers immediately. That's just part of our
Right.
generation.
Yeah. Right. 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 Well, what do you see in, like you said, in your organization? That's why it's so cool. I'm excited to be on this because, like you said, I've been doing this 35 years. I don't see a lot of brokers doing exactly what you're doing, Nick. So, applaud to you. And
Thank you.
that is your generation, right? So how is that going to transcend into, the next 10, 15, 20 years? What does that really look like?
Yeah, I know. It'll be interesting to see what that looks like. I think there could be more education around food service as a career
Yeah.
in school. Coming out of school, it was, can you get in the legal field or the medical field, into the technology sales side? None of those things really resonated with me,
Yeah.
and I was thankful to have or grateful to have my dad who got me into food service. But without him, I probably wouldn't have joined this industry. I wouldn't even have really known it was a thing.
Yeah, yeah, and that's fascinating too. I just dropped my son off yesterday to the University of Nebraska in Lincoln, and he wants to go into business. And you just try to let your kids get their own path and runway. And I don't talk a lot, but he sees a lot of what Dad does, and if truth be told, I think that might have influenced him a little bit. That hey, I see Dad doing this. I do like the business arena. Now, will that be in food manufacturing? Who knows, right?
Right.
But yeah, that's interesting.
So, what does your current role look like? What are some of the things that you're working on?
Yeah, so chief revenue officer is really chief commercial officer. It's kind of the same thing. When I came here 10 years ago, I love telling this story because here's this diamond in the rough company that's been around since 1908. My God, 100 and
Yeah.
whatever, can't do math, 20 some years old, and it's vertically integrated, and they're selling a center of the plate core item.
Hmm.
And if I may, I guess I'll kind of share you the story because when I was recruited over here, the headhunter called me, and I laughed because I live in Minnesota, and ironically, Bongards, Minnesota is seriously only 10 minutes from where I live. And I run the circles of food service, and so when the headhunter called, it says, "Here's this company, Bongards. Have you heard of them?" Like, yeah, I don't see them anywhere. I'm like, I'm thinking they're 50, 60, 70 million, no big deal, right? And I'm
Yeah.
like, I actually declined. And she kept bothering me, and just said, you know what? You only live freaking 10 minutes from him. Go meet with the CEO. So I did. Long story short, Nick, as I mentioned, here's this quality vertically integrated dairy co-op. I grew up as a farmer. We're owned by about 230 of the hardest family, dairy farmers. It's hard to be a dairy farmer. You can't leave the farm. You got to milk the cows twice a day, sometimes three. And it's hard to have a life, especially your generation. We're close to the metro. So, do I want to do that, or can I go into the city and do this? So we're up against that. But anyway, fast forward, here we are 10 years later. When I started, the company was doing about 108 million pounds in volume, and we're up to almost 400 million pounds. So, and we base everything in pounds because dollars don't really mean a lot if you're going to judge true growth, because we're a commodity. You got to look at the pound sales. But here was this company, they just didn't know how to go to market. They had a broker network that were only 1-2-man shows. You never even really heard of them. I met with people like Burger King and Arby's and that, and they're like, who's Bongards? And I'm like, oh my God. So this is like taking, candy from a baby. So all I had to do was plug and play. I upgraded the sales team. Found the great broker network, which, by the way, you're part of it now.
Yes.
So we upgraded all of that, and we've just reaped the rewards of that. So it's fun. I'm proud to say that we're probably the second largest processed cheese supplier in the United States. Most people aren't aware of that. Probably shouldn't be putting that on the podcast because I like running under the radar, but but it's a great success story, and it really resonates to me because who doesn't love dairy? I love cheese. Most people love cheese, and I love supporting 230 hardworking family farmers out there. So it's a great story to tell.
You mentioned hiring a great team, hiring brokers around you. What other tactics did you use to go from 100 to 400 million pounds? Because that's a pretty large jump.
Yeah, and you know what? I use this analogy a lot. It's that rifle approach versus the shotgun approach. We know what we're good at, and we know what segments we're good at. As an example, this is kind of broad, but we're laser focused, and you'll know this, Nick, because your company works with us. I have a VP of C stores. If you want a C store expert, I got him. That's all he does. We have a director of K-12. That's all she does. I have a VP of National Accounts. That's all he does. I have a director of Industrial Accounts. That's all he does. So we really cog that segment. And this ain't earth-shattering news. A lot of companies do that, but we're so laser focused in those segments, Nick. That's why when we meet with you as our broker, we're like, hey, if you got somebody playing in the C-store arena, Mike's your guy. If you got somebody in K-12, Jill's your girl. And so that has just done and served us very, very well.
Yeah. A lot of times I get manufacturers that reach out all the time. They reach out via LinkedIn or our website, and they're looking for a broker, and you can tell that they don't know where to start. What was some of the techniques or strategies you used to hire brokers and find them?
Well, it's like anything. You have to have people believe in you. It's kind of like when we interviewed your organization, early on, because we weren't the Shrivers of the world or the Kraft of the world. So all I have to do, and it's the same way with my salespeople, is show them the vision. And the vision is pretty simple. It's center of the plate. It's an extremely big category. There's limited competitors out there, ironically, in this particular segment, and so once you share that story and sitting down and they can see, yeah, this is a company that I can truly grow. And because a lot of those brokers we brought on, Nick, similar to yourself, it's virgin territories, are very limited income.
Yeah.
Not a lot of brokers these want to quote pioneer anymore. And that's fine. I get that as well. I mean, you're in the epitome of that market. I mean, driving in LA is freaking nuts, right? You got to schedule all your meetings. Okay, I'm in Orange County one day, and then I'm in, Santa Barbara the next day. It's a very capital intensive market. So
it is.
Just laying out that vision to the brokers, because some of them we pay significant money, and some were small, but they got to significant money. So and again, that's the fun part. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. What about looking out into the future? You went from 100 to 400 million pounds. What's maybe the next goalpost that you're trying to hit?
Yeah, that's a really good one. If you look in the dairy, processed cheese is, small growth, very limited growth. Natural cheese is off the charts, and that's an area that we've been growing in, but We take our vertical integration model and we'll send that over to what is known in the industry as converters. And they'll convert our 40-pound American style blocks into shreds or to, slices or cubes or whatever. So, so we're strategically looking to expand our natural. Not that we aren't processed. I mean, it's a big category and it is still growing, but we see a little more upside on the natural side of things. So we're focusing some time and energy to grow those segments. And then also as a byproduct, Nick, we haven't mentioned a lot. Usually we're a big whey provider as well. But when you produce so much milk, you only get so much whey. So typically, that infinite amount of, or that finite amount of whey is pretty much already pre-sold unless we expand our milk, which by the way, we just made a major announcement. We're doing a $125 million expansion to our natural plant that's going to take us roughly from 4.5 million pounds of milk a day to almost 6 million pounds. So there'll be more runway for us, and that works its way down to more processing capabilities, to more natural capabilities. And so that's our frontier. And, we're still growing domestically really well, and our international business is growing very well as well. So we kind of got a nice peg there. If there's anything Bongards is missing, is we're not the retail company. So that's a segment where, boy, you got to invest some heavy capital because it's all packaging, and like you said, if we're going to go down that route, that's going to be a whole different play for us if we want to try play in that arena. So we talk about it, but most of our resources and capital are really going to the food service and international side.
You've mentioned the international side. Is that something that falls under you?
Yep. So yeah, it does. And I don't have an international sales manager. So it's my customer service lady and myself are kind of running that. And we feel, and again, here's another thing with technology, right? So we have a very robust website. We get pings all the time, and it's crazy what comes from international, and you really have to decipher because every country, different laws, sorbic acid levels, we got to be registered there. We got to protect our brand. There's a lot that goes into it, but there is a lot of opportunity there because a lot of the rest of the world really loves American cheese. They love American cheese.
Wait, what do they use it for?
If you go, like our biggest market is South Korea. They have like rice. You should go over there with me. They have similar concepts where they're doing like rice burgers and that, like going on a burger, right? Just different applications. Of course, they love American concepts. So you'll see a lot of the Burger Kings and the Paneras and Five Guys of the world. So that makes its way in there. But there's just a growing appetite for and a love affair with American dairy. So, whether it's, Asia, that area, and even now we're getting all kinds of traction over in Saudi Arabia and the MENA area. And so it's pretty cool.
Yeah. You mentioned whey. It was funny, growing up, my dad used to represent Tyson Foods. Yep. And he said when it came to those chickens, they found every which way to sell every single part, from the blood to the feathers to the meat, everything.
Yeah.
And it sounds like that's what you're doing similarly with
dairy. It's that verdict. And again, I did work for Smithfield, so I can relate to what you're saying. Everything on that pig got used. It's absolutely crazy. Some stuff that Americans wouldn't try, but there was a market for it in China or, somewhere in Asia, but for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. Question for you.
Yep.
For somebody that would one day want to be a chief revenue officer, what advice would you give to them? Let's say they're starting on their first day in food service.
Yeah. Well, never stop learning. That's probably, even at age 57, today I learned more things. And so if you have that appetite and can, objectively look at yourself and critique yourself, I remember when I was 21, 22, full of piss and vinegar, going to take on the world, knew everything, right? And that just changes over time, experience and all that stuff. But, I would say learn from people. There's so many knowledgeable people, like I mentioned, John Drown, Tom Karen. Just be a sponge on those folks, even your dad. I mean, there's so much knowledge base out there. And again, even at 57, when you think you know it all, there's so much more for me to learn. Like I said, international is kind of the new wave for myself. And I just be very open-minded. And more importantly, do like you and I are doing. Even though I know this is over technology, pick up the phone and talk to you. The society to me, and I'm kind of getting on Pandora's box here, of living behind a computer, looking at your phone. And I'm just as guilty. I don't want to put myself on a pedestal, Nick, but I tell my kids, if you can pick up the phone, talk to Nick as a human being and a person, you're going to already outflank 75% of your competition. I really believe that. Even though you tell me your generation is so into Instagram and I believe
Hmm.
that, and I think that'll stay there. But I still think especially in the food service area, that human interaction, that does not go away.
Yeah, it's true.
You know?
It's funny, when I first started in food service back in 2015, I was sitting there. We had a little office. I think it was like 200 or 300 square feet,
I
and I was.
remember it. I was there.
Yeah, that's right. You came. That's right.
Right.
And I was sitting behind a desk just sending emails, and my dad's like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "I'm trying to get appointments with with chefs at some local colleges and whatnot." He goes, "No, no, no. You need to pick up the phone and actually call somebody. Even though you went and got a business degree, they never
Right.
taught you how to speak to adults. You need to get out there and do it and talk to people and fail." Uh,
Yeah.
and he said there's no books on how to be successful either in this industry. It's just you have to learn by doing. And that was kind of what started this whole podcast idea. He actually had the idea
Okay.
about a year ago. He's like, this could be the book, to teach people on how to be successful in this industry.
Yeah. So did you find that intimidating then? Obviously, you're shooting out emails, and that's easy to do. But when you actually had to pick up the phone and say, "Hey, John Doe," was that hard
Yeah,
for you, or what was
it
that like?
was. Yeah, it was. I think what I first started was I went to Pacific Coast Highway here, like from Laguna down to Newport, down to Huntington, and I would just walk up and down the street because there's tons of little cafes
Yep.
there, and go in, and I had a bag of some different types of waters and
Yep.
pre-made sandwiches and things like that. And that was how I kind of learned to get comfortable talking to people and trying to
Yeah.
sell them something, and
Yeah.
just learning the vernacular as well. What's
Yeah.
a distributor? How can they buy it? Things like that.
Yeah. So did some of you welcome you in, and some of you say, "Nick, get the hell out of here. I'm busy. It's lunch hour or whatever." I'm sure you got a hodgepodge of stuff.
Got a hodgepodge of stuff. I think one of the biggest challenges I had initially was trying to find the decision maker. A
Okay.
lot of times you just talk to somebody behind the counter, especially at these smaller places, or you could get the owner who's standing there. But I think it was trying to
Yeah.
navigate and find those people. And
Yeah.
then those who said, yeah, I want to buy this, I could never figure out a way to actually get them the
Yeah.
product. Cisco and US Foods, it's hard to throw a big
Yeah.
glass bottle drink on the truck.
Yeah. It's funny you talk about training, and now you just hit another spot I just thought of back at Schwann's, the old Miller Hyman training. And that still holds true today because,
Yeah.
let's say we're trying to sell Cisco San Francisco or Cisco LA. And it's crazy when you start org charting who reports to who, and you actually put that on a piece of paper, it just becomes so clear. I mean, because you want to deal with the economic buyer, right? The old classic
Right.
training. You really need to figure out who's pulling the strings here. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of them just kind of go through that motion. But if you actually take the time and say, okay, Cisco San Francisco, or if it's just this local chain or an even independent, is the mom the buyer, is the dad the buyer, the sister or whatever? And if you can figure that out, it certainly makes the time frame of the sale go a lot quicker.
That's right. Especially when you have a built-in relationship with that person.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
In the past few years, have you had any new beliefs or behaviors or habits that you feel has most changed your life?
Ooh, I can. Yeah, this is a word I say I never want to bring up anymore. Here's the old COVID word, right?
Yeah.
There was a lot of positive takeaways from COVID, even as brutal as it was, and I've seen everything. I had a junior in high school that went from straight A's to, quite frankly, flunking almost every class. I think, long story short, is I think an aha moment for me was really, stop, smell the roses, Nick. That still does resonate. Here we are now, kind of back into normal mode. I've seen my travel pick up. I did really relish those couple years of just time with my wife, kids, better conversation. So that to me, I think we have to maintain that, or at least not let go of it. I think that's why there's going to be, when it's all said and done, I think this hybrid model is really what's going to shake out of it. I mean,
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, we're human beings. We need to be with each other. That's got to be there. And so, so that to me was kind of a life altering. Hopefully, I won't get to go into the speed that I'm used to because life's too short. I mean,
Yeah.
we learned that through COVID, and I think priorities have changed. People are still sitting on the sidelines. We're having hard times filling our plants with workers, and I think a lot of that attitudinal thing and just realizing things have changed the way people look at life.
Yeah. Yeah. COVID really did change a lot, especially in the food service industry. We were really impacted because so many, restaurants and food service operators were closed down. It was tough. But you're right. It did. My experience was similar. I got closer to my wife and my
Yeah,
friends and my
right,
family because work kind of just slowed down. There wasn't, I can't go make a sales call to somebody
right.
who's shut down. What are they going to buy from me?
Yeah, yeah. And there's got to be a balance there. I mean, this country was built on sweat, blue collar work, and people are floating out there 4-day work weeks, and they talk about the Europeans with 8 weeks of vacation, and every culture is different. I mean, this country, was built from blood, sweat, and tears, and obviously generations it keeps evolving and keeps changing, but. Like you said, I can have the shittiest day, and you might have to edit that out. But I say this with my team, Nick. At the end of the day, we're selling cheese.
That's right.
Really? I mean, I'm not trying to put the rocket on the moon or be Elon Musk and do this. I mean, we make cheese, we make it well, but at the end of the day, we're not perfect. The cuts might be wrong, the color might not be. We might misprint the box, we might put the wrong cheese into something, but at the end of the day, we're just selling cheese, Nick.
Yeah, that it's so true. There's so many people I wish I could just tell, say we're just selling food. We need to take a breather. It's
Yeah.
not open brain surgery. It's just food.
Yeah, that's the other thing too, right? You remember the old adversarial relationships that seem to happen between who owns the end user, the distributor,
Yes.
manufacturer. That's the other thing on COVID. And maybe it's an age thing too, and I've seen it with younger people such as yourself. It's kind of that attitude. It's like, okay, I'm working hard for you. I'm doing it. Give me a break,
Right.
And so I've seen kind of a more laissez-faire type attitude, right, wrong, or indifferent, but people aren't quite as rattled as much. I mean, I've seen that change and shift. Now, I don't know if it'll ever go back to that way because I see it. Some people like whatever. I mean, we're doing the best we can, and I don't want to say take it or leave it, but I think sometimes that's what's coming out.
Exactly. You're right. It has. I think there was a lot of people prior to COVID. There were tough business people to deal with, but a lot of them, their attitudes have changed, or they're not in the industry anymore. It's like, what happened?
Yeah.
COVID did change a lot of different things.
Oh yeah, and as us as a manufacturer, I mean, we should be doing anyway. We're always looking at our top customers, profit wise, margin wise, and things like that. And there's some that you have to work really hard with, and you really got to question yourself: is it really worth it, Nick?
That's right.
If he's gonna or she's gonna hammer me for a quarter penny or half a penny, and I haven't conveyed Bongard's worth, whether it's customer service or trucks on time or fill rates, then all for what, right? I don't want to get beat
Right.
up. Go buy from my competitor.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
When you look back at your career up until this point, is there anything that you would have done differently?
Yeah, that's another great question, Nick. I think I probably would have toned my style back a little bit more. Like you heard me say, when you're 18, 19, aggressive, full of piss and vinegar, your DNA is type A. But again, that's where learning and education came in from mentors, where you can take constructive criticism. And like you said, even at 57, I still like constructive criticism. I think I'm still man enough to, hey, if I didn't address it right or if I offended
Mhm.
somebody, you can still do that. So and again, that's hard to do when you're in sales. It's kind of most people are going to be extroverted, and it depends on how driven you are. I think
Yeah.
what I would have did a little bit different is to maybe just tone my style down just a little bit. Back when I was in my 20s and maybe even early 30s.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. What if you, I got a fun one for you, and this will be a head scratcher. If you had the attention of the whole food service industry, what would you say?
Ask that question again. If I had the attention of the
If you
whole
had the attention of the whole food service industry right now, what would you say? What would you tell them?
Well, in today's environment, I would tell them to treat everybody with respect
Yeah.
and try. I mean, now we're going off a different slope. This country is so divided, and I really don't think we are divided. At the end of the day, when you and I forget about the politics, who's right. I mean, this wedge that's been driven between people is bothersome to me. It bugs me, and I just wish people would treat each other just more respectfully, being more open-minded, just listen, don't jump to conclusions right away. We're fed a bunch of information, some true, some not true. I don't want to judge Nick right away. Step back. Let me think about it. Let me research it a little bit more. So I would just tell our industry to, just try to be the way I grew up. I mean, we saluted people by, sir, ma'am, her. I mean, again, I kind of see that as old school because you see that changing, Nick. I open my door for my wife, my kids, for the opposite sex. I mean, some of that old school stuff, which I still think is just the way society should be. And I think what's really changed that is right, wrong, or indifferent. I don't have it here in front of me. Thank God I put it away. The iPhone, the technology, those are game changers for us, Nick. So you have to really ground yourself. Because again, I'm not a saint. I'm sitting around a table, or we go out for dinner, and I look around and my wife's on her phone, my daughter's on. I'm like, why are we even out to dinner? And again, I do the same thing.
I know.
So there's those challenges. We never even heard of mental health before. Some really, really big issues that are going on today. And I think that's byproducts of certain things. I don't think there's any going back. I mean, I love technology. I mean, every call I do now, I'm not on the phone, I'm Zooming you.
Right.
Even at my old age. So I can see you. I love it. I mean, normally I'd keep the camera off, but it's so normal now to do that. So there's a balance. I don't know how I got to, where your question was, but I just think as human beings, I just wish we were a little kinder to each other and we're more cognizant of it and try to quit dividing people.
Yeah.
Because we have more in common than we have apart.
Oh, absolutely. That's one thing I learned through COVID is, you have feuds online, on Twitter or on whatever social media. And then you go out in the real world. I'm like, wait, people are talking to one another. They seem to be getting along. What I see on the screen is different than what I see out in the real world.
Yeah. Well, and another good example of that is translation. You can send me an email and I read it totally different. I'm like, is Nick pissed off? And like, no, he didn't even mean it that way. That's why I love the human interaction of picking up a phone or getting on a Zoom where I can see you and talk to you and get rid of the interpretation piece,
Absolutely. Yeah. On the iPhone, you can talk into your, talk out a text message and then hit send. And a lot of times those don't translate correctly. I'm like, is this person really mad at me or are they totally fine? I don't know.
Guilty as charged. I've sent it before and I'm like, oh, Siri didn't spell his name right or whatever. And I'm like, I'm just trying to go 100 miles an hour again, not paying attention to detail. And folks, yeah, you're right.
Exactly. Well, Scott, I just wanted to say thank you so much for, again, taking the time to join me here, do an episode together. I knew we'd have fun. And I'm glad I learned more about you that I didn't know. And so thank you for being open and vulnerable. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, again, Nick, I appreciate the time. I think what you're doing as an individual and obviously as your broker network is a different level that's starting to transcend. So hopefully we'll see a lot more of that. And hopefully that'll help because again, when I go for a walk, I love listening to podcasts, maybe it's enough to drive, certain schools like the University of Wisconsin or South Dakota, which are dairy schools, if we can just get the interest of other kids out there, like, hey, this sounds unique in industry. And so I applaud you for doing it and coming up on almost a year doing it. That's pretty impressive, Nick. So
yeah, thank you so much, Scott. I really appreciate it.